Today we're looking at Proverbs 22. A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, and loving favor rather than silver and gold. Again, about values and perspective. The rich and the poor meet together. The Lord is the maker of all of them. Now, it isn't that the Lord makes you poor. Sometimes situations around you, but the Lord can be the Lord of that poverty, that you can worship Him in your lack or worship Him in your wealth. We tend to think that wealthy people are more blessed by God than poor people. They're the same. God expects us to use the resources we have to glorify Him, whether it's a lot or a little. It's the same in His eyes. It's only different in ours. A prudent man foresees the evil and hides himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. Again, this one I've used several times. A prudent man will see evil and prepare for it. If you think it's going to rain, you think it's going to snow, you think it's going to be dangerous terrain, you prepare for that. But the foolish man will go on and will be hurt. By humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honor and life. If you want more riches, you might not become super rich. If you want more wealth, if you want more work, more of your labor, if you want more life, then by following the Lord and His precepts and His designs are how you do it. Much of this in 22 is pretty much what we consider common sense, and yet you need remindings of it because the world wants to pull you away from what is common sense. All it needs you to do is make 2 or 3 bad decisions. I remember I was playing chess with my son, and you can make one mistake and probably win. If you've made 2 or 3 mistakes, you're probably going to lose. It depends on, then it's up to who makes the most mistakes. Life is that way. A lot of times it's because I haven't followed the Lord and I've made mistakes. He that soweth iniquity shall reap vanity, and the rod of his anger shall fail. The idea of, again, vanity, this is mine. The idea, again, we're talking about. Cast the scorner, and contention shall go out. Yea, strife and reproach shall cease. Cast out the scorner, the one that's always not content, always looking at the dark side, always looking at the negative, never willing to be helpful. They're always scorning things. That's the wrong way to do it. You don't know anything, that kind of thing. So again, 22, like I said, I won't go into all of them. I want you to read them. The slothful man says, there's a lion without. I will be slain in the streets. He's being slothful. He's coming up with any excuse not to go and work for a living. The mouth of a strange woman is deep pit. He that is abhorred of the Lord shall fall therein. You're choosing to be abhorred if you're going to go fall into the pit of a strange woman. This strange woman, again, from Proverbs 4 and Proverbs 7. This woman that's calling in the street, she's standing and winking. Oh, I've been waiting all day for you. She says that to everybody. He that oppresses the poor to increase his riches, and he that giveth to the rich shall surely come to want. You're oppressing the poor and you're giving it to the rich. Again, we see that in our economy a lot. We're oppressing people, taking away wages, and then giving it to businesses and corporations. Again, a lot of this is pretty circumspect with where we are. So here's another one with it. Rob not the poor because he is poor, neither oppress the afflicted in the gates. This is again the marketplace. If they're poor and they come in and you take all their stuff by raising your prices for them, but yet you gave your buddies a discount, that's not how that works. For the Lord will plead their cause and spoil the soul of those that spoil them. It will come about. You're spoiling the poor. When you stand before God, He will spoil you. So be very careful. What you reap, what you sow, is what this is saying. Make no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man don't go his way. You will pick up their anger. You'll pick up their fury. If you're with a lustful man, if you're with a slothful man, if you're with a contentious man, you will pick up their energy. Unless you can have the dominant energy, you need to step away from that relationship. Makes sense. Remove not the ancient landmarks, neither the fathers have set. These are standards, again, that have been set. Landmarks are also landmarks in the sense that the Jews were not allowed to change their borders by changing landmarks. But the standards that we have from the Bible, that these have been set. And sometimes landmarks are set by, just your property with your family or different things. And sometimes it's certain traditions. But mostly, be wise about landmarks. Don't think that because someone else has more land than you or has more than you, they're better than you or more responsible to God for you. Seest thou a man diligent in his business? He shall stand before kings. He shall not stand before mean men. If you're diligent about your business, 22 is about, again, business. It's about economics. It's about taking care of the poor. It's about not being slothful. You could say 22 is really about the business economics of how we were to approach that. So I like how Solomon, when he writes this, he kind of breaks them up into little bitty snippets. You can almost see that many of these are not tremendously random. It's, again, sometimes it's his thoughts. But if he's talking about business, he stays in business. If he's talking about a woman, he stays with the women. If he's talking about wisdom, he kind of stays here. If he's talking about how we treat one another, he'll stay in that frame. So again, 22 is about business, and it makes a lot of good sense. Going back to yesterday, we had finished up, again, we were talking about in 13, where we talked about David getting Ziklag, and how that we had in 12, where we had Chronicles connecting with 1 Samuel, and it talked about all these mighty men. And really, we didn't spend a lot of time on he did this and he did that, and here's this, and here's Saul, and here's Jonathan, and here's David with Abimelech, and all these little side stories. We're moving fast now because we're moving to Jerusalem. This is all setting up Jerusalem. You will see that in 14 we start talking about Hiram. And remember, Hiram was the king of Tyre, and he sent cedar and wood and all kinds of stuff for David to build his house. So David built his house, and when we talk his house, we're not saying just one building. That whole household, that whole area of the kings, where he had houses for different things, and maybe a house for a wife here, and he may have had even a house way over there for this wife. Remember, one of the wives was the daughter of Pharaoh, so he would have different houses around. But in his protected area especially, all the houses that he would need for stables and he would need for security, you get the idea of the small compound building up your house. But the centerpiece would be the king's house. So here we have, David setting this up, and it says, Tyre sent him cedars and masons and carpenters to build him a house. And he perceived that he had this wonderful house, but the Lord was still in a tent. And this is kind of cool of David to think about the Lord instead of thinking, well, look at how I'm getting from it. And he starts talking, and he talks about his wives here, and it talks about his sons, and you see them talking about Nathan, talking about Solomon, and he talks about all of his sons. And he goes in, and he's got a problem with the Philistines, and he goes and inquires of the Lord. And this is very cool of David. He doesn't just rest on yesterday's information. He has this, and he goes to the Lord and says, yes, you should go in, and I'll deliver them to you. Great. So he goes in, and he beats the Philistines. When this happens a second time with the Philistines, God tells him to wait. Remember the story that we saw in Samuel about he was waiting, and he was under the mulberry trees, and God said, wait. And when you hear rustling in the mulberry trees, then attack. So because God said, I will move, and I will do this. He says, go not after them, turn away from them, and turn not upon them. Go against the mulberry trees, and when you hear a sound in the mulberry trees, at the top of the mulberry trees, you shall go forth out of the battle, for God has gone forth before thee to smite the host of the Philistines. So he's going in. He's going to do the smiting the second time. And again, this is a little bit like, the first and second coming. The first coming is about David, the son of David, taking it. The second coming, he's now the warrior. So the man, God, who's Jesus, secures our salvation. Then when God comes back as the God-man, it seems the first time he's the man-God, second time he's the God-man. Same thing, don't get all upset. He's going to be taken against his enemies. That's when I told the church that vengeance is mine, I will repay, when he comes back to be Jehovah, in this sense. So he goes, and we recounted the story of God doing this two different ways, but also David approaching God. In 15, David made himself houses, and he wants to go, and he wants to create a house for God. And so he goes again, it's not fair that I live in a great cedar house, and the Ark of the Covenant is out in a tent, even though it's God's tent. So he goes in. Oh, in 15, before I get to that, he goes in and establishes the Levitical order. Before he approaches to do this, he also strengthens the Levitical order. And this is important for Jerusalem. It's important that David set up his house. It's important that David starts wanting to set up God's house. But first, he's got to set up the Levitical lines. So we talk about the Levites here and how they approach and how they are to do. The problem in 13, remember when the one guy was killed because he touched the ark? Well, why are you carrying the ark in, you know, like a bale of hay? You've got it in the back of a cart. You were supposed to have it on your shoulders. You're supposed to be, the Levitical priests were supposed to be carrying that on staffs, and they were ceremonially clean. So that was David's bad. He didn't approach this like he should have. And here and now, this time, he's like, okay, if I'm going to be moving this, or I'm going to deal with this God of the tabernacle, I'm going to have to deal with him as he wants to be dealt with, not how I want to deal with him. So he sets up these Levitical lines. He talks over them, the Korathites, the Gershonites, those are Merari, I should say, and they're the ones that have the different responsibilities. Some are the carry, some are the to take care of. Some are to take up and sit down and put down. He tells them to sanctify themselves and get ready. And so then they're going to go and take care of this, that there's no breaches upon the people, that they will be priests, and that they would take care and bear the ark. And the Levites appointed also people for worship. They appointed, you got this whole chapter about singers. And again, like I've said before, singers were not just people who sang a song. They recitative, they spoke. They spoke things in rhythmic patterns, easy to remember. Much again, like we see in the Psalms, and much of these stories, even with the phraseology of the King James Bible, is for easy memory. I remember this. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. You have this phraseology, da 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 da. I mean, da 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 da. It's almost in one breath that you could say many of these things. Go to any textbook, go to any book and try to do that. And it's very hard to remember things in a textbook. You almost have to just memorize. This is why the newer Bibles are very stilted, because they're in this very stilted, non-breathing pattern. Instead of saying, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. The Lord is my shepherd, I will not want for anything. I mean, it just doesn't have the same flow. It wasn't created to give us that kind of picture and that kind of ambiance of remembrance. That's why the King James Bible is so much better. It's created to be remembered, to be taught from, and to be remembered. So you have these singers come up, and they spend the whole chapter talking about the singers and how they instructed them with songs and all these different people that were coming up. We talked about Obed-Edom. He's the one that had the Ark of the Covenant, but he was also a singer and a doorkeeper. It's funny how the doorkeepers were also the singers and vice versa. This wasn't just security. This was also, who gets in and why, and making sure, are you cleansed, etc. They're doorkeepers. And David's and the elders and the captains over the thousands went to bring up the Ark of the Covenant out of the house of Obed-Edom with joy. And so here in 16 is where we go back again to the story. Remember that remember when David danced and his wife looked at him and disdained him, and she never had children because of her disdain. This is the story we're telling right now. So he goes and has the Levites set everything up, cleanse themselves, get everything ready. Then he goes back to Obed-Edom, where he left the ark after that boondoggle, after that mistake. He was trying to bring up the ark, and the guy touched it and died. So they stopped and left it with Obed-Edom and said, okay, watch this while we go take care of things the right way. So they do it the right way. And now they go back to Obed-Edom, who's been blessed by God for watching over the ark and not looking into it or touching it or anything. And so he goes with his thousands, and he goes. You can imagine this whole entourage of people that go. They do this thing correctly. They put it on its staffs. They carry it correctly with joy into the tabernacle, which has been set up. This is not the temple. The temple comes with Solomon much later down the road. So everything's set up, and so they're bringing this in, and he has set up these singers, and they're singing, and there's joys, and there's trumpets, and there's loud music. This is a rock star moment. This is a rock star moment for the Ark of the Covenant, not for David. In fact, David dresses down, which makes his wife mad. He dresses down into a simple linen cloth. He's bare except for a linen cloth. That's humility, And he's dancing around and leaping, and sometimes he's not paying attention how he's leaping. And instead of people being, oh, I'm shunned, oh, how dare the king is acting like a vulgar, everyday guy or some street guy, No, he's dancing before the Lord. In fact, the maiden saw this and didn't see him as vulgar, but saw him as expressive of his love for God. So he's out dancing around. There's music going all over the place. And his wife looks out the window and disdains him. And so, and she remains childless for the rest of her life because of this. But he's dancing for the Lord. I love what he says to her, and it's not recorded here, is that you thought that was vulgar? I'll be even more vulgar still when I'm worshiping my God. So I love what he says about that. In 16, they brought the Ark of the Covenant and set it in the midst of the tent. And David had it pitched there. And he made an end of the burnt offerings, and he has this wonderful time where he makes sure everyone goes home with a piece of bread and a piece of flesh and a flagon of wine. You don't just come to the party and leave. You come to the party and take the party home. Continue the party in your homes. You go home and here's some wine, here's some food, here's some bread. Let's party in the house. So David's taking this home and wanting people to see the joy of the Lord is in this kind of feasting upon taste and see. In 1 Chronicles 17, that there is a psalm. In this psalm, he gives it to Asaph, who is one of his chroniclers of psalms, one of his musicians. And he goes and it's one of these that it says that give thanks unto the Lord, call upon his name, make known his deeds upon the people, sing unto him the psalms unto him, talk ye of all his wonderful works. I won't go into everything about this psalm, but it builds. It's one of these again that we had looked at that had a building. It's like it created a momentum. It moves on to the wonderful works of God and wonderful works of God. And if anything, it gets louder and more vocal, more figurative, more expressive, more excited. As you're moving on, you feel this thing pick up pace, even of the covenant of which he's made with Abraham and his oath to Isaac, and he confirmed the same to Jacob for a law and to Israel for an everlasting covenant, saying, unto thee will I give the land of Canaan. You feel the momentum build up here. Unto thee I will give the land of Canaan. And I will give it the lot of your inheritance, which you were few, even a few, and strangers in it. And you went from nation to nation, and you went from kingdom to another people, and you suffered no man to do you wrong. Yea, he reproved kings for you. The idea of what God has done, and as God has built you up. He's seeing what God did again from Abraham to his day, and was reminding these people through this psalm, not just to look in the small term of who God is, but look at this long history of how he's been there consistently and carefully and wonderfully, and how he's looked that he's taken care of you and made you this nation. Declare his glory among the heathens, his marvelous works among all the nations. How great is the Lord and greatly to be praised. He ups it a little more. The excitement of who the Lord is, for what he's done, and for who he is as he did it. We have to realize that God's character and God's actions go hand in hand, that he doesn't have actions that aren't a part of his character, and he has no characteristics that he's revealing to us that are different from his actions. There may be more to God than we know, but there will be not anything different from what we've seen. I'll say that again. There may be more to God when we get there than we know, but it will not be different from what we've seen. So saying, touch not my anointed and do my prophets no harm. He says this to the nations. He considered the obedient nation of Israel his prophets. They're speaking my laws. They're speaking my judgments. They're speaking my commandments to you. And so here he's doing that, and it's really, he just kind of builds and builds and builds. How great is the Lord and greatly to be praised. He says that again, for he is to be feared above all gods. And again, the expressiveness. When you read this, I want you to see it going from here to here to here to here to here, and on it goes on and up. He's just being so emotive with this. Let the heavens be glad, and let the earth rejoice, and let all men among the nations, the Lord reigneth. Again, the excitement of what he's going to say here. Oh, give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endures forever. Say, save us, O God, of our salvation, and gather us together, and deliver us from the heathen. Then we give thanks to your holy name. Blessed be the Lord God of Israel forever and ever. And all the people said, amen, and praise the Lord. He gave this song, this soliloquy. It may have even been to tune, I don't know. But it's the again, the excitement of it more than the tune, how it would just build and build and build and get more expressive and more expressive. Very rarely do we see a psalm go, be, it's just the same timbre. Either it starts low and it goes high, or it starts high, goes middle, and goes back up high. We've saw a few that started high and went low. Again, we've seen this, but this one is just bills. And he left before there the Ark of the Covenant and these people, and had them continually minister before the Lord. So now he's leaving ministry to the Levites as was appointed by God. And talks about Obed Edom again, and Zadok the priest. They went in there and they offered burnt offerings unto the Lord. And they also had Herman and Jeduthun and the rest of those who were chosen, who were expressed by name to give thanks to the Lord because his mercy endures forever. These guys went also. You had Levites that ministered physically, but you had Levites that ministered in song and in recitative continually with these words being spoke around the altar. This wasn't just a place of quietness. It's like having the radio on to a Christian station all day long. You're only hearing it about the Lord and how wonderful he is and what he's done for us and how he took us for few and made us many. This is what's happened. And then also, they had their cymbals and their musical instruments. And the sons of Jehuiada were porters. And the people departed every man to his house. And David returned to bless his house. Again, worship is established. But where is all this happening? In Jerusalem. Once again, Chronicles right here is we went from the world to the region to the nation to the tribe and now to the area. God's focusing in on Israel, focusing in on, on Jerusalem. So seeing this is pretty cool. Seeing this again, touching those same buttons all the time. This is why we have Chronicles, is to factor in the importance of Jerusalem to God. We tend to forget that as Christians, the importance of the city, the importance of the Old Testament to us as Christians. We don't touch it anymore. Most churches and pastors don't even go into this. We'll spend all of our times in the book of Acts and beyond and talking about all of those things there. We hardly ever go through these books anymore. It's up to us, Christian men especially, to learn this book, to live this book, to understand this book. And it's up to us to teach this book. No one else is going to do it. If we don't do it, it's not going to get done. That's just the way it is right now. Thank you.